All right. Greetings, everyone, and is it good afternoon, good evening to wherever you're tuned in from. My name is Laban Cliff. Honored and glad that you could find time to join us through our social media platforms and be with us at this time where we discuss a topic that not so common. I mean, but of course, gaining traction in this part of the world, which is remittances and financial support to families. We're calling it black tax. And of course, some of you well researched will also look towards white tax and say, what is the influence in this as well. So we welcome you to this session. We want to have an engaging and interactive session as we go along. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you all on board. Just to give you an overview, it's going to be about an hour long session. Well, we hope to also make it a very interactive. We hope that you can also inbox me your questions. Just maybe if you have any questions for the panelists and you'd like to ask and engage with them, please make sure you actually do share with us as well. The hashtag we're running for this evening is Being African in Africa. And of course, for more of that, you can visit www.beingafricaninafrica.com, where you have more kind of articles as well, previous sessions that were held, and even an email address should you have an idea or ideas that you actually would like for us to engage in on. Further, also want to also kind of talk to us deeply about the topic and introduce the speakers. Just really quickly, on board, I'm sure you see her face somewhere. There she is, Abena Amankwa. Abena Amankwa is from South Africa. She's based in Joburg. She's actually HR director in Ipsos, if I got that right correctly, Abena. And she's also a founder of Asabea Consultancy, and she prides herself saying that this is actually 100% female Black owned consultancy firm. She's also a model and loves people development. So thank you so much, Abena, for joining us today. I also want to recognize and welcome Seudi White. Seudi is based in Lilongwe, Malawi. She's also a social development lawyer and also a change management advisor. Thank you so much, Seudi, for being here with us. I also want to recognize and welcome Eric Mlambo. Eric is a journalist based previously having worked for SABC and also having worked for DSTV as well. It's an honor and a pleasure to have Eric on board as well. There are two people I just want to give a shout out. I don't want to kind of, this is Mwanja Nganjo, of course, and Louis Lou, who will be working behind the scenes, of course, having pieced together the program. It's an honor and a pleasure, Mwanja and Louis, and we thank you so much for the great work that you do behind the scenes. And we, of course, will recognize you towards the end of this production. So this session is going to be, it's actually currently live on Facebook and YouTube. So let's get engaging and let's get interacting. Now, for the first time, maybe you can come close and, draw your seat closer to your machine and let's have a conversation. So it's a topic that I would say it's a bit touchy, maybe because people would argue, is this being done somewhere? Is it not being done? Are we talking about black tax? What exactly it is? What exactly is it? And what are some of the, at times to understand a topic, maybe you need to understand what it's not so that you understand what exactly the topic is. So I'd encourage you, even as we begin the discussion and as we begin the conversation, think about what black tax is not. What I want to say, what black tax is not, it's not an obligatory kind of a payment that is due to government, which of course is the general conversation and the general definition we have of tax. So it is not that tax as you know it conventionally, but this is in apostrophe what your responsibility, what is deemed to be a responsibility of the young, the middle-aged towards the elderly in society. Now, something that we also mentioned as well in our social media as we were doing a run up towards this is talk of the FDI numbers. I know anytime we talk about foreign direct investment, we always refer to the FDI numbers in Africa. So we're talking about $46 billion as the FDI inflows as at 2018. Now, what we are getting from statisticians is that black tax has actually managed to surpass, this foreign direct investment. So what we can say, which of course we don't have any research, authoritative research that has gone into this. And here I mean the likes of the World Trade Organization, the likes of UNCTAD, the likes of institutions that are actually charged in looking at matters trade. So we don't have an institution that's actually researched on black tax. But if you're talking about that black tax actually surpassed FDI numbers, we're talking about in excess of $50 billion. So definitely this is, it's a cash cow that really needs to be tapped and really needs to be looked at and paid great attention to. So the top countries that we're seeing, China, UAE, and India, are some of the countries that have been focused on black tax, foreign direct investment. Now, in the other side, on the other side of the coin, is to look at these same countries also host a lot of diaspora, African diaspora, in China, in the UAE, and India. I'll speak extensively about UAE because I've actually interacted with Africans who are working in the UAE, and you see that there's actually a lot more that is that is expected. I see some people who want to join us. Cindy Amunga, you admitted to join. Karibu Sana. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, that was just a teaser to kind of get us invigorated into the topic, get us engaged as well. So to kind of break the ice and to begin to set the ball rolling, will be one who's passionate about people development. Perhaps maybe in the bit about supporting families is also part of people development. And here is talking about families because you say that families is a single most unit in a society, like the actual unit broken down. So Abena Mankwa, it's over to you. Let's look at demystifying black tax, what it is and what it's not. How does it look from your place, in Josie? Over to you, Abena, to take it up from me. Over to you.
Can everybody hear me?
Loud.
Great. I think excellent. Thank you. I think this is a topic that is I think it's so hot for Africa because it's actually seen as a daily occurrence in a lot of families when we talk about black tax. And the belief that I think Africans have that you are your brother's keeper. In South Africa we call it Ubuntu. Is deeply seated in the African culture. That cultural preference does look at family first. How do you continue to support your family, and not just your family, but I think the extended family as well. So when I was trying to prepare, to talk to people about this, I started looking at some of the experiences that people have. I'm in human resources, so it's quite important for me to understand what is the human experience, people that have gone through dealing with black tax, and what is their perceptions around black tax, and what is their experiences around black tax. Not assuming that everybody understands what black tax is, and I'm glad you started off clarifying that it's not a government tax that is required. I actually was asking one person, in talking to people, trying to understand their perceptions. And actually, I think I assumed that everybody understood what black tax was. And, the feedback was, is it something to do with money laundering? And I was like, no. So my understanding is that probably they've dealt with black tax, but they don't know it as termed as black tax. So, so what do we call this so-called black tax? But it's actually, like you said, black professionals between, basically giving to families and to supporting, families or extended families. And, I think this really sits in a lack of adequate financial resources, in the black communities. I think coming from a family that my parents specifically were the first ones, if I can say, my parents were immigrants from Ghana, and coming from an area where they were not financially, well off, but being the one that were, getting into a different country and building financial wealth. The expectation was that, okay, you're going to help other families come up as well. So growing up, I mean, I never understood why I had families in my house. I would have cousins, I would have, you know, not just my siblings, but families that would come and actually get supported. And today, we've seen some of these families grow and, you know, have achieved great things financially. So, you know, in some way, in my research, I could see, for me, that was a blessing. But in talking to quite a few people, and in my, you know, in my research in talking to people, I noted that, you know, for some, it was actually quite a burden to, you know, having to, you know, financially support families. Some of these people were not earning, you know, a substantial amount, but the expectation was that they are going to look after their siblings. And in particular, one person I spoke to, you know, asking if she was going to further her education, looking at, you know, growing generational wealth for herself and her family, was saying, but I can't afford it because I'm looking after my siblings. So, you know, in some way, I started to look at, okay, so depending on the circumstance in which, you know, support is being administered in a family, it can be seen as a burden or it can be seen as a blessing. Because in some areas, I think Black tax truly supports, you know, family members, and people grow up and, you know, are supported to achieve great things in their career and to help others. And in other ways, it actually keep, you know, Black professionals back in being able to further their own goals, especially when it has become, you know, a situation where it's expected, and not because the person is financially able to do it, but because they are the only professional within their families that have been able to, you know, have a career. Now the expectation is that you're going to support, and every family member is looking for some form of some financial support from you. And when it becomes a situation where it's a demand, and that was where, you know, some of the people in which I spoke to, the minute it becomes a demand, it really becomes a burden because there's expectation. You know, you could not possibly maybe be earning enough, not being able to pay your own housing, not being able to build a house or to financially grow yourself or to actually achieve your goals because you are having the expectation that you have to support family members. So I think, you know, when we have to demystify what Black tax is, we have to understand, where do we stand when it comes to Black tax? Is it something that is a burden, or is it something that we see it as a blessing to, you know, the family? And, you know, sometimes we have to look at the African culture. You know, we have to understand how has Black tax actually helped African culture to, or Africans to be able to move out of poverty? Because that can create, you know, I think we see that in the expectation. And I think, you know, within our culture, or the seated culture understanding of, you know, Ubuntu, or putting family first, or helping families, have we been able to, you know, bring Africans out of poverty? And I think those are for, you know, some of the questions almost that for me came up, and actually the thoughts that actually, you know, sat up with me was that, what are you going to leave with? Are you going to be, have the experience of being a blessing, you know, in terms of, you know, the resources you have, and the abundance of it, so that you can share it? Or is it becoming a burden where you don't have enough, or whatever you have, the expectation is that you support everybody else, and it ends up being a burden, as opposed to something that, you know, as Africans, we can use to actually further each other on.
Well put, Abena. Thank you very much. I like how you put it and said that you kind of draw it like it's if it crosses the line and becomes like it's a demand, or shall I say like a figure, you know, you're getting that spreadsheet with the details and numbers and figures told, okay, this month we didn't expect anything, what is happening, and what have you. And it's funny how the Ubuntu spirit has captured, even, you know, as much as it's deemed as a sub-Saharan Africa, it's still across the entire Africa. You know, there's that spirit of Ubuntu still exists and goes ahead. So great insights you bring out there. Thank you very much. And it's also now kind of cut and raise and of course delve deeper, and we can even chat further and see now when we're talking about Saudi is going to talk to us about giving in Africa. There's the idea about the perpetuation of dependency syndrome or versus a safety net, because more often than not, it's considered that perhaps it's a chance to say, okay, let's support this initiative. Let's come through and support this initiative in Africa. But then again, we find, of course, there's a dependency that you actually have a provision towards that. So perhaps is this giving in Africa permeating through and going through to the families and saying, hey, I mean, after all, as a country, we got this support. So even as a family, we should get that. So Saudi White, it's an honor and pleasure to have you come on right after Bena. And of course, as a lawyer, it will be nice to bring in those terms, like what exactly is legal and what exactly is not legal, which of course is illegal. Over to you, Saudi. You can unmute yourself. All right, let me help you to unmute. There we go. I'm going to ask you to. All right, there we go. Over to you, Sylvie. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cliff and Abina. Thank you for your first presentation. Yeah, so first of all, I think my topic is talking about dependency, and it is talking about safety net. A safety net. So the point is, before I delve into this, I want us to talk about what do we mean by safety net? What do we mean by dependency? Dependence, I think, is pretty easy because you're either independent or you are dependent on someone. And then if you talk about safety net, in acrobatics, as you know, this is the net that is put below those swinging acrobats so that when they fall, they end up falling into that net and then they don't hurt themselves. And many times it's a legal requirement for their circus. And then talking about generally from a financial perspective, it is a safeguard against positive hardship or adversity. So let's link the two. The safeguard against hardship or possible hardship and adversity vis-a-vis independence. My take on this, that any kind of help, before we delve into a customary or a practice-based help, any kind of help ordinarily should provide some kind of safety or some kind of safety or empowerment from adversity or total disaster. And it should empower you in one way or the other. So this goes to the issue of independence. When we talk about black tax, first of all, the terminology in itself, in my opinion, it is wanting because generally in many societies, particularly in our societies in Africa, we view tax as a burden. And I think everybody, to be quite honest, there might be some societies that pay tax happily because they have a contract with government that they know that their tax will be used for things that they'll be able to see. But it doesn't mean that they're very happy to pay the tax. So I suppose tax, I would say, is quite a negative thing because it's something that you give to the state. So now we have taken our race as Black people and added tax. And then because tax has a connotation of burden and, it's like now we're creating this problem that it is a bad thing. So I've never understood why we are calling it black tax, because other societies also help each other. They create that empowerment. They're proud to do so. And in many cultures in Africa, as you know, people are very proud to help their people, to help their families. Just yesterday, I was talking to one of my friends who lives in Canada, and I was asking her about her brother, whom I'm having a business conversation with. We want to do some kind of a show at my lodge. So I wasn't sure who he is, but his name was familiar, and I called my friend to say, so-and-so your brother, can I trust him? I want to enter into this business relationship with. And she said, he's my brother, but he's my child. I have raised him. And you should have seen the pride on her face, that she was very happy to have done this. And obviously she did it for the love of the brother, as well as, the cultural expectation that, if you're older, you look after the younger ones most of the time, particularly where your parents, they're probably retired or they didn't go to school. Many people are proud of it. People are proud to have said, you see all these siblings of mine? I'm the one who raised them. These are my kids, although these days they're quite rude or whatever, but they're my children. And it even goes beyond that. In our culture, and coming from Malawi, when we have funerals, usually we don't do insurance. I see some shows, a particular South African soap opera, which I like, quite frankly. And when there is death in that soap opera, you find that they're talking about a burial society, and then ladies have contributed to that. In our culture, we don't do that here in Malawi. The family contributes to a funeral, an extended family funeral. That's how we do it, or part of what we're now calling black tax. The reason why I have something against the terminology is that we're trying to make it look like helping other people within the cultural context is bad. I think it's a good thing, it's an honorable thing. Where it becomes a problem, when it becomes a burden. I think a burden becomes a burden if your contribution to the empowerment of that person, one way or the other, is not showing fruit, is not showing the independence that you had hoped. And that's where I see at every culture, you find that people be like, I've raised my hands, I'm not gonna help anymore because it is not making a difference. This is where it becomes now truly black tax, and it becomes white tax. It becomes Indian tax. It becomes, Chinese tax. When you help, whether out of cultural identity or whatever, but it doesn't show up. It doesn't show the results. But over and above that, I know there are also pressures that are emanating from the same pressures that families in the end start taking advantage. They put pressure on someone who's more successful than others to be the one always giving. That's when it also becomes black tax. That's when it becomes white tax, Chinese tax, Indian tax. But there's another angle that I also wanted to talk about, which I've also found interesting. I've seen that in Kenya, and I've seen it here in Malawi, whereby if you are the well-to-do one, or considered to be well-to-do by standards of family, you find out that even though everybody is relatively independent, because you all can't have 5 houses, and 3 vehicles. You find that someone has a house, a small house in a high density place, and they are really able to pay for electricity and water and whatever. And then, those ranges are slightly higher, but there's one who has everything, if I can use that. You find out that there's a bigger burden on that one. And the person always feel a little bit guilty that if they don't help, he or she will be hated, or his or her children will be hated. So they would rather keep giving so as to give clearance for their children to be liked by the family. Because usually the punishment is sent to the children. Don't play with your cousins and whatever. And we even seen the more extreme case of Barack Obama. And when it came, it was well discussed by the Kenyans, whereby his half-brother, Malik, has even written a book and has discredited his brother, saying that one was born in Kenya, and even produced a fake certificate from long ago and say, what is this? Just spiting. And when you look at what he says is the issue, he's rich and he doesn't share his money. But when you look at Malik himself, he's not poor, he's actually very educated, because Obama's actually very smart people, So it's that vindictiveness. His story is, he's rich, but he's stingy. Basically what he means, and I knew what he meant. What he meant is he should behave like the richest person, like a millionaire, and just splurge the money. Otherwise, they'll turn against you. That, for me, is a real example of black tax. And there's no need for Barack Obama to do that. After all, he has worked hard for all he's got. So there are all these dimensions that I wanted to bring. The final dimension that I wanted to bring to this conversation is the issue of subjective feeling of what is burdensome, and the objective feeling of what another person would see as burdensome. When I looked at what Trevor Noah was having a conversation with Oprah Winfrey about black tax, he sort of, in my opinion, he sort of took a more position of it's too much. And Oprah was sympathizing with him that, yeah, this black taxing is a bit too much. But I thought that was an objective view coming from a Western mentality that says, do you really have to give this much? Oh, shame, you guys, you suffer if this is what happened. But I felt, well, I don't know if when you hear Trevor's story with his mother, that, if he doesn't give her anything, then I think he owes her something. So, but I don't know the nitty gritties of it, but somehow I didn't really like that conversation. I kind of felt like Oprah, being a Westerner, was feeling that it's wrong. Because objectively, many of us are proud to help our families to the extent that it empowers them, to the extent that it creates independence. When it doesn't, that's when it becomes a very frustrating thing. That's when the subjective feeling of it's a burden starts, most of the time. So that's what I wanted to say about this at this point in time. Thank you. I don't know if Laban, if you're there. Is it Eric? Who is there?
Yes,
Yeah.
I am.
Oh,
Thank you,
okay.
Sodi. Appreciate it. I'm just trying to go over the facts that I have, and I'm glad that you mentioned facts. The Obama family story. We've seen, a good example from the brother, but, a sister standing up for the brother as well, and coming very strongly and being there and saying, you know what, this is my brother, and this is actually what I can do to support. That's Alma Obama. They have a foundation together and showing, the benefits, of this black tax. So in drawing kind of the parallels, I would see the sister as a good example, perhaps, of, how to leverage on such a resource. I don't know.
Yeah.
Quick thoughts, Saudi, perhaps, if you have, on what the sister has done as opposed to what the brother has done to discredit.
Yeah. Actually, it's a very interesting. So you're so right. Actually, Oma is, I think brain-wise, she's as equally smart and probably even smarter than him, because she speaks several languages, including German. And she's very proud of the brother, but has never wanted one to be the brother. That's also another thing about black tax. She's always supportive of the brother, and believes in ability to work with the brother for greater empowerment of others. Whereas Malik thinks the brother owes him something, that he should give and give and give. So for me, if Barack at some point, using his position, if it has helped Alma, then it has helped. Because of course I'm saying that Alma is very smart, and I even think she's smarter than Barack. But I'm just trying to show that if he has helped because he was the president of the United States, you can't get more powerful than that. Then it has paid off. That is the black tax we want.
Yeah. And leverage of it. All right. Thank you. Great insights to bring that, Saudi. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Of course, we will have a discussion, and I know our participants, our panelists, those who are logged in, could want to engage with some of the ideas you bring out. So please note them down, and then we'll come back to it as when we open the plenary. I see more people. I'm admitting more people as well. For those of us who are joining us now, Karibuni Sana. This is a discussion on, talking about black tax. And this is something that, of course, being African, I'm sure you've experienced in one way or another. You're not too late, but just in time for the last speaker for the evening. That's Eric Mlambo. Eric is going to just delve deeper and perhaps give us an insight on what he feels. And sorry, Eric, I'm just trying to get your topic right on just now, so I can just mention it. Yeah, I was just trying to, of course, you can imagine my screen as a moderator. I have very many pages on right now. Um, Eric is going to talk to us about how do we level the playing field between the haves and haves not. So that's a question to you, Bona Eric. So please, how do we do that? How do we create a balance and bring it out onto it? I know we spoke last night and of course chatted about being journalist and how to compress. I know it's a big topic. Try to compress in 10 minutes is not doing you great service. So over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Leban, and the other speakers. I think I've enjoyed the discussions so far, and I'm glad that I'm part of these conversations. For me, I think I'm gonna touch a bit on what COD was touching on, looking at the current scenario. And I think when my topic is more on leveling the playing field between the have and the have-nots, which under the current socio-economic situation in the African continent feels like it's another mountain to climb. I think for me, when I look at, I will use South Africa as an example. We have a population of over 60 million people, and you just have over 10.4 million South Africans working. And of that, if you want to classify it by race, you will find that the majority of those that are on the unemployed side are mainly Africans. And if you want to go into where actually are these Africans located, they are in the deep rural, they are in the most disadvantaged communities. So if I have a family member who is outside of South Africa who needs to be sending resources or money to me, what is the most likelihood of me receiving such a wire transfer? Firstly, cost effectively. Secondly, in terms of location, where am I most likely going to receive the money? And these two questions I pose because most of the rural infrastructure, you would not necessarily have a receiving pay point like a post office, or you would not have a shopping mall, which would make it easier for you to be able to receive or to collect cash. And when you look at the other side of, I'm on the other side and I need to be sending money back home, what are the main challenges that I'm most likely to be faced with? But I want to go into the issue of black tax, and I think Cecilia was speaking more on it, and say, what is the impact of culture on us? What are we expected to do? And one of the main challenging issues is, if I am the privileged person within a family, I feel that there is that expectation that I should be assisting. But if you also look at the issue of Ubuntu, which says I am because of others, there is that broader expectation that we need to play a kind of a big brother or big sister role within our families. However, the challenge is, where do you draw the line? Right now, you would find if I'm married into a family where economically they are not advantaged, is it me as a son-in-law? Am I expected to go and assist in that situation? Or it's just me and my partner that will say, we move along and create our own family without bringing the others? And I think that's where the complication of culture and the issues of lobola come in and create another layer of complication. And if you are in the disadvantage side of not having, would you be able to assist your other family or the immediate family? So I think if we look at the challenges, that mainly people that are unemployed, they actually are more at a disadvantage, and I think innovative solutions are needed for them to be able to participate or actually make a meaningful contribution. I mean, I had one speaker speaking of funerals. In South Africa, the situation is that when there's a funeral, as the person affected, you need to have money for the whole week. you would be spending a whole lot of money trying to make sure that everyone that is coming is fed, is well looked after, to an extent that you even need to arrange accommodation for that on its own. Is what for me I will classify as black tax on families, because I mean a funeral you could easily spend 100,000, whereas I feel that that's where we could help each other to relieve each other in terms of funerals. Weddings are also another a classic examples where the expectation would be two people could come together and contribute towards putting together a wedding which they will desire. However, we still find that within families, there is that expectation either from the male or the female side. They need to be covered. There are certain things that they will want it to be done their way. And as the groom or the bride, you might be expected to cover the expenses. That I feel it's also another challenging thing that within the African community, it's an issue where we need to look at it and say, how do we make it easier for these two people who are starting a journey into a family, for them to either have a saving rather than focusing on spending on issues that has nothing to do with them. I mean, I want to touch on three individuals. One is from Malawi, one is from Zimbabwe, and the last one is from Mozambique. I've had personal interactions with these three individuals. The Mozambican one is a married father with kids in Mozambique, currently working in South Africa, Johannesburg. In my interaction with him this past week, I found out that if he works in a week and he makes between 2,000 to 4,000 rand, 80% of the money is sent home. However, he gets taxed because the platform that he uses to send money home, he needs to pay 10% so that money can reach home quicker. And his choice of sending money home is a traditional transport system where you go to a bus station and you find a driver that you know would be going back home. And obviously with money that is sent home, when it arrives at home, it needs to be shared between his wife, his parents, and siblings. So when I try to break down to say what level of dependency these three layers have, I found out that the siblings, they quit school because the brother can be able to afford to send money. So my question is, how long can one be able to sustain in such a situation? Is he expected? But he feels that he needs to look after them as siblings. But the question is, how can we come up with a solution to either start a business, but are they interested on the other side? And I think those are some of the family challenges that we find ourselves kind of surrounded with. The second one from Zim, the situation is that he left quite young and came to South Africa. Whenever he has access to cash, he doesn't feel that he has to send money home. He feels no responsibility at all. And for him, I think alcohol becomes a way of him spending money. And when I look closer at it, he's kind of the last born in the family, which he does in a way feel that I'm not responsible for anyone. But I also do feel that there are other psychological issues involved at play, which might make him not really feel that he needs to be responsible for anyone. And obviously, there is the last one from Malawi. And I think my interaction with him was a committed family man who would work and save money. He hardly sent money home, but it was more of, I will collect the money and have it with me. And once in a while, he will stock stuff and kind of send those goods home. The story is that once upon a time, he bought whole lots of goods, including a television and stuff, which he used a truck to send home. And none of those things arrived at home. which you would understand that the transport they used, obviously the person felt that they needed to take whatever, and there was no way of tracing the driver. So I do feel that if I was to look or examine or research further on those that are underadvantaged, they will probably have the internet. They would know how to find an easier, effective, reliable a method of couriering or sending stuff to their loved ones without exposing themselves to such a risk. And even if there was a risk, there will be a place where they could complain to say, I've sent goods using your services and my goods have not arrived. They would have a tracking system that they will be able to track. So I feel the space or the scenario as it is, it needs us as Africans to innovate. And I think looking at the fact that we're kind of a developing continent, the fact that we don't have reliable African solutions for Africans, that is the space where we can have more entrepreneurs coming up with innovative solutions that will target mainly those that are they have not, as the topic would have kind of described them. Something that is reliable, is effective, will also be sympathetic to their current circumstances in making sure that when we assist them with the spirit of Ubuntu. And I think we're still far off from leveling the playing field, because we may not necessarily have technology or the internet to make sure that our people are able to track or they can follow as much as anyone who is within the urban context. And I think with that, that's a bit I'd like to share with you. Thank you. Laban?
Well, yeah, Eric, thank you very much. Great insights, really appreciated. And I like the fact that you actually put it in the country format, like, Zim, Malawi, like different perspective, because I know there are also cultural nuances that come in with this. And great questions you raised there. The key one being, how long can one sustain this? Like the sustainability of this. And I just put a note under that writing. Is it a fish, or are you going to give fish, or are you going to give a fishing rod, basically? So ideally, I know the support is there, the heart to support is there, but then again, you don't know how far is too far. You mentioned the idea about cultural practices, funerals and weddings. I just want Mwanja to give us an estimate on how much a wedding in Uganda can cost, and then we can average that with how much a wedding in Kenya can cost with all the traditional processes that are involved. And of course, families being told that you are actually in charge of this, and it's considered a communal burden, or it's considered a family burden for that matter. Funerals, that goes without saying for sure. And I know people actually become very close in time of such need. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We're doing very well for time, and I really appreciate the speak would clap forward. You can use the clap pattern and or actually turn on your video and clap to our speakers. That was great. That was great. Thank you so much. So Jennifer, appreciate it. I see again many of you clapping as well to our speakers at part. We want to appreciate them, and thank you so much for their insights. We don't want them to go too far, but I just want to cross over to the audience. Of course, logged in from Facebook, YouTube. Actually, Nyangu Kayamba says, on the other side, as Africans, we help each other. For example, when I had my children, my mother would babysit without being paid. It was also expected that when the family had a financial need, and because I was in a financial position to assist, I was expected to do so without complaining, without complaining about it. So it was the silent rule. So yeah, people actually expect that you need to come through for them, and don't ask questions about it. Bisharo says Africa suffers this issue quite a lot. Chitalu Luamba says complex issue and actually a great one. Thank you. Nyang also agrees with Bisharo's point, saying good point. I feel we need that helping with a purpose. For example, help pay fees to better the life of the siblings. I like that. It's help pay fees to better their lives and increase their skill sets, as opposed to just giving them money, which will end up perhaps in other not so economically viable financial use. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's funny. We are actually growing in number when we're nearing the tail end. So, but if you're tuned in, please use the chat platform to ask your question. But at this point in time, I want to open the floor up. I see some very good friends. One based in London. That's James Kiriamiti. James, I would upon your black you've gone through black tax perhaps on that matter. So James Kiramiti, just talk to us about your perspective. Your perspective. James, if you got me. Oh yeah, yes, your perspective. You've been supporting family back home. You have relatives back home. How's it been? Do you see any benefit in it? Is it something that perhaps we should create some sort of a legal system or a policy around it? Because if you see these figures overthrowing, or shall I say, topping FDA numbers, then we need to pay attention. James, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I really hope you can hear me because
Loud and clear. Sure. Go ahead.
Perfect. Go ahead. Perfect. Great forum, and Laban, good to see you again. I think I've been listening very keenly to COD. I think I joined a few minutes later, but I listened to COD and to Eric, and they made some really, really good points, and I was just jotting down a couple of things. COD, I agree with you. It's not only a black tax. If we look at our friends from India, they too have a very big, remittance outflow or inflow into their own countries to support. And funnily enough, I was involved with a company locally in Kenya called Pesa, and I was running their operations for London to Kenya, remittances. And the majority of things, really, the remittances took three categories. One, which we've talked about, supporting across funerals and really giving gifts. The other part was a big chunk of people were sending remittances for education, helping their family members to boost them to learn a little bit more. But then the last one, a majority of people were actually doing things in terms of development, right? So you have people who are building back home, they're buying back land, they're investing, really back where they're from, which is a very noble thing and adds value. But I think where we really have a challenge is, systems, where we're sending money for funeral or when we're sending money for just giving, supporting. I think that's really a reflection of the state of the country itself, right? If people are not able to help themselves, they can only depend on those that potentially can help. And that's really where, we can call it a black tax. And really Mandela says it himself, if people are not given that opportunity to fend for themselves, they have no option but to, he says, to be an outlaw. But in this context, they really only have the option to depend on the ones that can support them. And that becomes quite cumbersome. And I think from my perspective, where it really becomes a tax, it's really there's a huge cost if we look at how much it actually costs to send money to Africa versus sending money in any other country in the world. And Eric, you said it so eloquently. We need African solutions. for African challenges or for African problems. And if we can figure out how to reduce that cost of remittance, which is as high as 15% in certain. I really feel that we can, we can empower and really develop the country, develop people, and really help ourselves. So, yeah, I think I'll say that. But some really, really good points from everyone who has spoken, and it's really been a great forum to take part in. Back to you, Laban. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Thank you, James, and thanks for the great summary. But I want about you, like you're supporting people back home. How has your experience been? Okay, so let me unmute you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah. So my experience, it's a mix. I mean, firstly, and I'll fall back to Eric's point. I have a phone here. It's very simple, very straightforward to send money, but the cost, the cost of actually sending the money is really where it's painful, right? Because you want 100% of that money to reach the person who you're sending money to. But the challenge is, you're paying 12% in fees, and it's taking a long time. And then also on the other side, they are charged to take the money out. And so if we can innovate to maybe find ways to make that transaction cost a little bit cheaper, I think that would definitely help. Yes, I'm sending money home to support, parents who, have retired, and also family and also friends as well who may find themselves, in a sticking point. But that to me is not a challenge, because we people have mentioned that spirit of Ubuntu as Black people, as Africans. We believe in helping one another. So that's not really the problem. The problem comes in when the cost of helping is, disproportionately higher in Africa versus other parts of the world, I would say.
Thank you very much, James. Appreciate it. And keep sending money back home. Support people. I have Abena, who I want to ask a question. So Abena, I don't know if you're still there. You actually have a passion of mine. We share a passion, actually, which is HR, and that's people development.
Yes.
I should admit that I started my career as a HR management trainee at General Electric in Africa. That's when GE was establishing its office in the continent, and I could see that there is the difficulty merging the two. You might find that, and I don't know. I think it's Seudi who mentioned on this in terms of like the tax implications. So you find that if I'm supporting my people back home, I'd like to negotiate with my employer in such a way that it's also included, perhaps in my take-home salary, in my package, for instance, and stuff like that. Take for instance, I have a friend who has a very good employer and would have a fuel allowance that he wouldn't use, even if he would fill up his gas for every day of the month. So he'd want to kind of extend the same, benefits to the parents to actually fuel the parents and stuff like that. So I just want to borrow from your HR perspective, like how do we infuse Black tax into the packs that staff take home?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it has become something that we hardly want to discuss, especially employers. I think, and it's looking at how do we structure ways, or how do we structure the package of employees, because you actually hear that all the time, that the employee will say, this money is not just for me. This is going towards my other family members and also siblings that actually require that money. And I think where we find, quite a few challenges is that, where it truly becomes a burden, and where the amount is not enough for to be able to share it across. So as employers, I think, there's always the demand that, the salaries you pay is not enough, because of course there's so much of burden on, some of your employees, around black tax, and they require, more to be able to support, within their families, depending on the situation in which they're in. And I think possibly the innovative way in which we have to consider, because I think as Africans, we do, because this is part of, like they said, it's part of our culture, in some way. But I think we almost have not, found ourselves, revolutionizing the way in which we pay to allow for, like you said, employees to be able to, support families. And actually, I think it goes beyond. And I mean, I think that's, in my view, how are we supporting families as well to think financially, to be able to not just, continue in terms of it being a handout, but to, allow for families to actually fish for themselves. I think, it actually was Eric that, actually mentioned it. So, in some way, we have to, consider the way in which our, employees are having to deal with having the burden of, dealing with black tax, having to have extra in which they have to cater for, as well as having to look after themselves. Because at the end of the day, it comes back to the workplace as well. Because when the burden is too much, we see that, the mental health gets affected. They feel exhausted of having to carry so much of a burden to, to look after a family. And we see that all the time in the workplace.
Okay. And I think then there are calls for like new and innovative ways on how to address this, and perhaps come up with other ways, perhaps, of compensation and benefits, especially for you, multinationals, I believe.
Yes.
Great. I don't know if Saudi has something to add on this.
So for example, sorry, okay. I just want to mention.
Yes, go for it.
I just wanted to mention, in South Africa, we have, part of, the benefits in which we have, for, staff is an educational benefits in which staff get taxed, less, because of the fact that they are supporting families. So it's an educational benefit that's currently in place, and that is, within South Africa, where if an employee is supporting a brother or a nephew or a niece, it touches somebody that is blood related. If they're supporting a family member, then that money would be taken off their salaries before they are taxed. So therefore it's tax free. So I think, that is one way in which, as a company, or I think some employers are taking advantage of, but I think they need to be, I think more innovative ways in which we can, support, within the business world.
Thank you, Benna. Thank you very much for your insights as well. Nyangu also is someone who shares in your profession. Nyangu, I don't know what other ideas and insights you'd like to share. Nyangu, over to you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, go ahead.
Okay, yes. I just wanted to just add on to what was being said earlier. Because yes, working in the field of HR, you find that some companies in Zambia, for example, will give a funeral grant as part of the benefits. So you're not going to get it on a monthly basis. You're going to get it when you have a funeral, and then you're asked, when you join a company, to register, say your wife, your immediate children, and then they'll maybe, if they're generous enough, they'll say you also add your biological parents. Because again, in Africa, when we talk about parents, your mother's sister is your mother as well. So they'll talk about, your biological parents, as well as if you have any legally adopted children. So you find that incentive itself becomes very welcome when you actually have a funeral, because you can go to the company and make a claim on it. And so you find that some companies even use it as part of their retention strategy, because they'll say, oh, in this company, we care about your, your parents, and therefore we're going to give you a funeral grant. So it really comes in handy, because sometimes it will come at a time when, you don't have the finances to help, to help meet the funeral costs. So we do use that sometimes to help with retention as part of the employee value proposition that a company may have. So there may also be other benefits, like, for example, the birth of a child. Like if you have a child every 2 years, the company, apart from giving you maternity leave, paternity leave, will give you a small allowance as well, just to help you with that. So those are just some of the ways that companies come in to assist. So I thought I could just add on to that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Seudi, any ideas that come to mind? It might be on this or something else perhaps that we've mentioned earlier. Okay, there you go. All right, there you go.
All
So,
right.
yes.
Somehow I can't unmute myself.
Not
so
to worry.
it's, yeah.
It's
okay.
a privilege of being a co-host.
Yes. So basically, taking it from what Nyango was talking about, it's very interesting. It's quite different. In Malawi, it's quite different from the way Abina talked about it. It's more similar to the Zambian situation, where what we call funeral benefits are part and parcel of the HR system here. Actually, in less formal employment, where it's in between, like a formal employment and an informal. So, for example, if you're working for if someone's working for a shop, like an established shop, but just a shop, and they don't have that kind of arrangement, and then let's say one of the employees die, you find that the relatives will come to the employer and demand that he buys a coffin. Buying a coffin in Malawi, it's a big deal. And they say the employer says, oh, it wasn't in the contract. I'm sorry, I can't help you. It's actually been standard for people to go and dump the body at the workplace of the employer. So it's a big deal. So even we are a lot of, like most countries, we also use a lot of house help, where you have, people working in the garden in your house, who cook for you, who clean for you. That's very normal. But what happens is very interesting as well from a Black tax perspective. I was thinking about it. My gardener a couple of weeks ago lost his older daughter, who was about 30-something year old. I've had my gardener for about 12 years. And I just knew I had to step in. I mean, there's no contract, at all. And this is like a woman. This is not even, he's like a baby. It was a woman who had died. And the first thing he did, as soon as the daughter died, he calls me. Of course, it was to inform me, but in our culture, the first person whom you call to say this has happened to me, they're saying, help, and yeah. So I just found, my husband and I found ourselves, without there was no discussion, because we were so scared. If we say, well, wasn't she working somewhere? We were so worried that they might come and dump her body, at her. So you find that those are some of the small innuendos of, African or Black tax, because, I also want to say something. Parliamentarians, politicians, when they're campaigning, our part of the campaign strategy is to buy coffins, buy coffins of ambulances. There's nowhere written where a politician should buy a coffin or an ambulance. But you find that that's part of the incentive. Of course, this whole thing about the obsession with funerals, as I call it, started when we were suffering the impact of HIV. That was, and it has stuck to this day. So companies, they will tell you about the funeral benefit. In my opinion, sometimes a call of duty, but there it is.
Wow, great, Great, great insights, and I'm happy that you actually brought it quite home in the sense of that this is actually a topic that we all of us experience more or less on a day to day. It might not be in our households, but perhaps we know people who've actually experienced it. Thank you very much, Seudi. And ladies and gentlemen, we're getting to the tail end of this, and allow me to just slowly bring this ship to a landing. I see John Lumbi's hand up. I only have just about um, uh, 5 minutes to wind it down. So, John, I think, is it a question? Is it a comment, perhaps? I'm just going to give you about 30 seconds to say something and call up on Ashley to give us her perspective. What are some of the key learnings? I know you logged in as well to get some ideas. So, John, over to you. Then I'm going to call on Ashley, and then I can wrap this up. No, sorry, I need to also give a chance. I need to also give a chance. Okay, John, go ahead.
No, it's just a quick comment.
Yes.
In our process of wanting to help, it's commonly acceptable in the African community. Those who feel they are obliged to help, we need to be careful that we do not become the center or the focal point where people should always run to. People need to know that we are not wells, we are not bottomless. And then the second point,
Yeah.
there are people who have become very creative in creating wealth for themselves by tapping in very different sources. So we need to be also wise to know who's doing what, and we can easily pick them up within the family network. He asks money from the uncle in Canada, the cousin in UK, another brother in South Africa, and and by the time you realize this guy has made $2,000 for himself. So we also need to be mindful and just how we help. That's all.
Okay, be mindful on how you help, and just be careful, of course, not to be taken advantage of. Ashley, you did your MBA, I think, in very different continents, I feel, to get that global perspective weekend. So, as a business student, when you talk about FDF flows, when you talk about numbers and what are some of your key learnings and perspective that you're doing from our speakers today, and perhaps even takeaways as a youth? Okay, sorry, Ashley, I've unmuted you. If you just go ahead, please. Yes, go ahead. Can't hear. Can hear. Yes. Let's try that out again. Okay. So I'm just gonna cut because I can't hear you. I can't hear you. But let me just cross to Eric. As you sort out your mic, cross over to Eric. Let me cross over to Eric. Eric Lambo, just to give me your closing remark. I know as a panelist, I didn't come back to you for a rejoinder. So Eric, as Ashley gets it out, as Eric, where are you at?
I'm here. I'm here.
There
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Now, for me, I think this has been very interesting, and I think as a takeout point is forward, we will need to brainstorm, to innovate, um, to make it affordable, to make it accessible. Whether I'm in a remote village or as long as in Africa, we should be able to transact using the same cost, and I think everyone would really like to, if I'm sending 200 rand, at least such 200 rand should be getting to the people. But at the same time, I think we do need to strengthen the issue of how do we support. And I think I saw someone commenting here to say, how about we educate someone versus giving money? And I think those are some of the ideas that as Africans we need to unburden ourselves. And if education, the way in which can free more people, that should be the way to go. And I think we need need to have more of these discussions with even more adults as well, for them to understand the burdens that are there, and for us to challenge things that I think are holding us back in the 21st century, so that we can move forward progressively.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate it. I also want to thank every one of us for creating time to join us this time. Without further ado, I'm just going to check really quickly if we have better sound. Ashley, can we hear? Okay. Okay. My apologies. We can get through to Ashley. It's not quite clear. We can get down, but I want us to try our best. We can at least we can hear you, but I want us all to on our videos. I want us all on our. I know you're not muted up. Turn on our videos. I want us all to please clap for ourselves and clap for our panelists. Clap to all organizers for being with us. It's a Friday evening. I don't know why the organizers do not want us to toast and toast to the weekend, but we can just clap for ourselves and thank each other for our time. Thank you so much for being here and for creating the time. And as a moderator, it was an honor and a pleasure to run this spot on and on time. I think being African in Africa, we have to demystify and take away that narrative that we do not keep time and we don't really address ourselves to our conversation. So Mwanja, Nganjo, it's over to you. I know as an organizer as well, to Louis, thank you very much. I want to just throw the ball back to you to bring the ship home.
Thank you very much, everybody. And yes, indeed, it's been a great evening. The discussions have been very, very rich. And actually, we expanded quite a lot on the cultural and social dimensions of the discussions as well. But I'm also glad to see that we also brought out some other aspects on the usefulness of how actually the African culture of remittances can actually be systematized in our workspaces as well. I think we touched a lot on the HR issues as well. And thank you very much to our excellent moderator, Laban, has joined us all the way from Kenya. Big hand to him. You did a very, very great job. Excellent. Thank you very much to all our participants. We had people joining in from Kenya, from the UK, from Canada. Our speaker, Seodi, was joining us from Malawi. We had our speakers also from South Africa. And being African in Africa is what this is all about. It's about bringing different voices wherever we are on the African continent and even beyond, coming together, providing spaces for these narratives to be taken forth. And just my thoughts on the topic, I started the intro when I did my advert on the fact that actually remittances are much, much more. They've actually overtaken FDI. They've overtaken aid that we get from other countries into the continent. So remittances actually go a long way. And I'm actually thinking about how Ethiopia was actually able to build the Great Renaissance Dam through the diaspora bonds. So these are just examples of how our African way, I think Eric and Abina had called it Ubuntu in South Africa. That's what they call it, the African way of living. I am because you are. So we are Africans, and this is part of our cultural norm. This is who we are as Africans. And yes, it's got its pros and cons, as we've heard from our speakers. Abina talked about how we can demystify it and look at it from a family context. Seodi also gave us some pros and cons in looking at it as to whether it's dependency or what kind of support it provides as a safety net. And also that giving to families is not really a duty, is it a responsibility, but it's a system that can also be abused. And Eric also talked about how we can actually find easier ways of moving money. And he gave us some insight to the fact that looking at the population of South Africa, it's about 60 million, and you only get about 10 million people working.
And then the financial burden now becomes pretty steep for those that are working. And thank you very much to James as well, who provided us with his views from overseas. Without taking too much of your time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Our next topic, we're going to send you an invite. It's going to be on decolonizing African education systems. We'll share the date with you. You can follow us on www.beingafricaninafrica.com. Have a pleasant weekend and God bless you. Thank you very much.